Thank you for this opportunity to share some adventures of our time at sea. It's centred around our yacht Chimere, which we bought in Bustleton back in 2006. She was the stuff of our dreams and very much a little ship in a way. You can see here some pictures of the interior and very much a step up from our previous boat, which was a Nicholson 32. We sailed it back to Melbourne, and then in 2009 I started a group called Medical Sailing Ministries, and the idea there was to use the boat to travel around the islands of Vanuatu and taking medical teams. And here's a few pictures of some of the work. This is a little island called Mere in the Banks group in the sort of the northern region of Vanuatu, and this is the welcoming committee. And there we are, sort of at an anchorage, which some people said, I wouldn't anchor my boat there. You know, this is Bob, one of the dental workers, and this is the chief of the island. The island itself is about 1 kilometre high, 4 kilometres wide. So it just pokes up out of the sea, and it's about 90 miles out into the ocean, and really most people never go there. We were going there because we were taking medical teams, and here we are climbing up to some of the only flat ground that had been sort of excavated out of the side of the hill. There you see the clinic getting underway and a view of the yacht from halfway up the hill, and the clinic gets in full swing, and we go from island to island taking the local and volunteer medical teams, the doctor, dentists, optometrists and nurses. And we partner with the Ministry of Health so that we're basically going where they want to go. And we also partner with a local group called PCV Health, which is Presbyterian Church of Vanuatu. That's an Indigenous health program. Now, there's always some time for some fun, and here we are having a game of cricket in the village square. And also we've got just coming up some singing and dancing as well. 2017 we were helping to conduct an oral health survey of the whole country, so we got around to about 28 different islands. Now that was Mere. We're leaving Mere now, and on the way north to another island called Gower. And on the way there's a little dot there you can see in the middle of the chart plotter screen there, the little island of Merrig. Now this island is just I think about 150 acres, and there's about 22 people live on the island at the last census. It's surrounded by a volcanic rock ledge, and we'd passed the island a couple of times in previous missions, and I'd asked the local fellow, well, what happens if there's someone that's sick there, we're not able to go there. He said, they would have lit a fire, which would have attracted our attention. But here you can just see in the distance there, we're waiting for the correct swell to make our way up onto the rocks, jumping out, and then the sea recedes off the rock ledge. So there we are, and coming back again. We're on the island for a bit over an hour, and one of my crew members just looked after the boat. We didn't anchor. It's not very good to anchor there. So, and here's just a few photographs of people that we've met, people who come up to the yachts when we get to a village. And because we're taking a local Indigenous health program around the islands, we're welcomed instantly into the community. And over the years, we've done missions 2009, 2010, 2013 and 2017. And we certainly load the boat down, and she's well suited being a steel boat, big flush deck. We've got 2 dinghies, and we've had upwards of 15 people living on board for 2 weeks, so it gets pretty cosy. There's always stuff to do on shore, and in that case there was a volcano on the island of Ambrim that people went up to see. Sometimes we do class photos for the local school, and we can print those out on the boat and laminate them. This is something not to try, bungee jumping. In this particular bay that you collected fresh water from the beach, it just bubbled up through the sand. This is a picture of showing that it's not good to assume the chart plot is accurate. You can see the line there went straight through the headland. Often it's out by a couple of 100 metres. In this case, it was a Sunday, and all of those kids swam out to the boat. Here we are in a picturesque spot. This fellow's one of the chiefs in a village. And volunteer teams do certain legs of each mission, and here's a sequence of photos. And it's not always like tropical sunshine and flat seas. There was also the chance in 2017 to help out with evacuating 29 people from the island of Ambai because of the volcano that had woken up after a long time and was threatening the entire island. So we looked at a little bit like a refugee ship. And it was certainly an entertaining day's sail, with each person bringing many of their belongings, even a pig in a bag and a couple of dead bats someone wanted to put in the fridge. But mostly good for Medical Sailing Ministries is mostly centred around an oral health program now, which we have created with the Ministry of Health. We manufacture toothpaste in Vanuatu. It's called Goodfellow to School Program, supervised brushing of teeth program in the schools, which is expanding. And really it's evidence-based, it's Vanuatu run, it's proven and repeatable. It's locally, we make a toothpaste locally, and currently, well, next year it'll be in about 40 different schools, about 3,500 students. Over the years, the 15 years that we've had Chimere, we've made significant modifications, and the davits on the back, and a generator water maker, a whole range of things. But the cabin layout, there's 5 cabins, big saloon. Here I've done a map of all the inlets and outlets on the boat and also on the deck, just to make it very clear. The freshwater diagram of the tanks and the water maker, the filling spots, and also the fuel. There's 1,400 litres in 5 tanks, so we've got a very good range. We only use about 4 or 5 litres an hour at the most. Other adventures, again, a bit of background on the boat. This one, a few years ago, 3 years ago, we went down to the Wooden Boat Festival, which was tremendous. And here's just a little bit of the activity. If they ever run it again, it'll be certainly well worth going to. While we're down there, of course, going around Tasmania, if you've been fortunate enough to travel particularly down the west coast, it is just stunning. Here we are actually coming through Banks Strait, which is northeast Tassie, with a tidal run there early morning, and fortunately we had the tide with us, and we're just racing along here. But we headed down the east coast into Port Arthur, and in fact we encountered many of the big tall ships that were then going to be in Hobart for the Wooden Boat Festival. It was a one and only Wineglass Bay, which really was always on my list of places to drop in at. It is just stunning, and here we had some sea mist coming in. In fact, at one point, visibility was really minimal. We went and anchored down Port Arthur on our way to Hobart, and in the morning we had the Soren Larsen, the Endeavour, and James Craig right in the distance, you can see. And here we are leaving in the morning. This is actually a little further north, just off Coles Bay, where we also anchored with the James Craig. And it was just a wonderful sight to see. Well, there's the young Endeavour coming in, and to see the James Craig putting on sail as we sailed down together down the coast. And the Endeavour then was also anchored near us, and just an amazing sight. Heading round the bottom and up the west coast, we came into Spain Bay, Port Davey, and the first, I suppose, proper anchorage as you head into Bathurst Harbour and Port Davey. Just amazing. I'd read about this place in Bathurst Channel where you just tie up to the cliff, and there's someone's put a hose down from water storage up the top. We actually filled up one of the water tanks with that. It was just lovely. It was actually quite a hot day. This guy here, John Land, my old university mate, has been sailing with me quite a lot, and we'll see a little more of him later. Coming into Bathurst Harbour proper, this is Horseshoe Inlet, and we tried to at least pull into, if not anchor, in as many of these little places as we could, just to say that we'd been everywhere. But within the space of about 15 minutes, it turned from summer into winter, and we'd anchored the boat down there. We left, one of the guys didn't want to climb up the hill, so we left him aboard with a stern line and the anchor. Now this little mutton bird must have hit the sail in the middle of the night and came clambering into the cockpit at 2 in the morning. And they don't generally fly at night, but he eventually did take off and fly away. And here we are, heading further up the coast into Macquarie Harbour through what's known as Hell's Gate, named by the convicts who would be stationed here on Sarah Island. And here we are motoring up the Gordon River. There's about 20 metres of water there. We stopped overnight at this particular landing, Heritage Landing, and actually had a marsupial come aboard in the middle of the night. So it really scared both him and me. In the middle of the night, it raced out. Anyway, here's another one of our adventures, and this one started last year. NZ 2020, in the wake of Captain Cook. So this was my supposedly 4-month trip or so, across to Picton from Melbourne, then down around the South Island, up around the North Island, then across to Australia again, ideally via Coffs Harbour and Sydney. Well, that was the plan, and I had it in 9 stages, and you can see there the different dates, how many days, from where to where, and roughly distance of each of those legs. And that helps in attracting friends and others to come aboard to be crew. Now here, I was doing some preparation, and you do need a clean hull certificate to get into New Zealand. And you can see there's no mast there. Well, I installed the rigging about 3 days before we headed off, so it was really really down to the last half day. But it really was a fulfillment of a 40-year dream to sail to New Zealand. And here's myself there on the left with my trusty crew, 3 of whom I found on the internet, and 1 was from a Melbourne yacht club. So it was sort of I suppose that the journey was going to be something between a Big Brother and Survivor, 10 or 11 days at sea. But we had a magic run across, and the wind was 10 days of 20 knot nor'westers with flat seas. So we had the wind off our stern quarter, and it was basically, you could rule a line across the Tasman. It was really a dream run. Until, of course, we got to Queen Charlotte Sound on the approach into Picton, and a 50 knot gale hit us. Again, fortunately, it was from the stern, but we raced along with just a tiny handkerchief up. And rather than proceed right into Picton, as the New Zealand Customs required us to do, we told them it was a bit of a safety issue coming in at night, and so we dropped anchor just around the corner here in a sheltered little spot, and came in the next morning, which they finally agreed to. There you can see a line straight across the Tasman, and even though it was howling outside, inside our cockpit here, it's very, very snug. And so we headed down the east coast from Picton out through the Marlborough Sounds, and then that's actually the west coast, but we did go down the east coast, and here we are anchored in Ship Cove, where Captain Cook stopped, I think, about 5 times. Actually careened the Endeavour there on the beach. My friend had a drone, so we were able to get some footage from the air. So we headed down the east coast to Akaroa, Littleton, then Akaroa, and these Hector's dolphins are really quite different to the normal dolphins you would see, or porpoises, and they were basically with us for almost a whole day. Quite rare, apparently. my friend had his camera on a stick so he could get some of this footage. From Akaroa, we headed down to the bottom of the South Island, and at this point it was just myself and my mate John, but we found someone on the internet at like 2 days' notice, a German tourist who joined us. And so here we are at Bluff, and this lady Mary on Channel 16, just amazing. And so helpful as we came down the coast, so we took her out for a coffee. But my family came, and you can see here the weather on the west coast there, not so good. Howling down there, about 50, 60 knots over there. But Stewart Island was in a bit of a wind shadow, so we headed down to Oban, which is the capital, and mucked about for a few days there. There was plenty to explore. These birds are very cheeky. The bins have to be bird-proof there, and so many little places that you can get into. Now these are albatross who are mixing it with the seagulls, bit of a come down for them. Here's a little bay that we dropped anchor for just a few hours, and then there was a break in the weather so we could head up to Fiordland. And as you can see there's just, before you get to Milford, there's a dozen or more different fjords. So we passed Pusica Point, and we're heading now into Preservation Inlet, the very first of the fjords, if you like, and we needed to get there before dark. And coming from the south, the fjords just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it started to rain. And of course, with the rain, you get the waterfalls. And it was just stunning. These are just sort of itinerant waterfalls that start up as soon as it rains. And there were times when it was, as they say, flat as bro. And there were other times when it was certainly a bit lumpy. This spot we needed to, rather than just make water with the water maker, we thought, we'll get some local water. We just tied up to the shore, and there was a spot there to water. Here we are, dressed a bit like beekeepers, and sandflies, you've just got to prepare, and they're not very nice. Here's a little spot, Cascade Basin in Long Sound, just thunderous waterfall, and we actually had a swim there. And a little further around the coast, Alice Falls in George Sound. You can see the little mud map there in a chart, in a cruising guide. And so we stopped there, tied up to a cable that was across the little inlet there, and also went for a swim here. Here's another little spot. And as beautiful as it was, the scenery down there, as I say, it just got better and better and better. Pickersgill Harbour, Captain Cook came in here and tied up to the trees way back in 1774, I think, and did observations there. That was actually 1769. Observatory Point, that was called. Where we did some astronomical sightings, and then we head a little further up, and of course Milford Sound. If you've ever been to Milford Sound, you'll know what I'm talking about here. Coming in from the sea, just stunning, and as good as all the previous sounds were, this one kind of trumped them all. The weather was just absolutely immaculate that day. Barely a cloud, and just still. A bit of a breeze up our tail. Stirling Falls as we came in. We came right up under that, Mitre Peak. And it was always a dream to actually sail in here. And here I was finally achieving it, which was just fantastic. You could feel the serenity. Then we come up to the Bowen Falls, and from there you've got to do a bit of a dogleg past a few buoys and into what's called the basin, which is very, very deep. And we didn't know about picking up moorings, but finally we did drop anchor, and it was always the risk of picking up a log, which is not so good. And someone came over and said, look, just grab one of those moorings. which were big fishermen's moorings, so there wasn't a crowd there, so that certainly gave us peace of mind. The Milford track kind of finishes there. You come from TR now on the other side of all of that, and then we're not very good at diving. In fact, we don't dive, but over the course of 10 days we were given about 27 of those crayfish, and very, very tasty. Now this place, I thought I'd better top up with a bit of fuel. It's not the cheapest place around, but it certainly would have to be one of the most picturesque. And yeah, the fuel was very expensive. But after 10 days, it was time for the family to head home, and they were going to go by bus from here to Queenstown, and then from Queenstown fly back to Melbourne. And they arrived hours before Melbourne went into sort of quarantine for travellers. So they headed off. I was just taking them around to the ferry terminal where the buses also stop. And from here, my mate John and I, we basically headed off the next morning, headed off about 4 o'clock, so as we get out of the Sound and all the way up the coast to Jackson Bay, and we even caught a tuna along the way. And we worked with the wind as best we could, and here we had the wind up our tail, and with the intention of getting to Wellington. But the prediction was that it was going to come on the nose for a day or so, so we thought, well, we'll give crossing the bar at Westport a go. And the weather was reasonably kind, and we came in here, and the harbour master let us tie up to his boat. And here we are heading up the coast. And this is something I'd always wanted to see, just really the high Southern Alps from the ocean. And again, the weather was just stunning. We had an amazing run up around the top Farewell Spit. We crossed our path from Melbourne there and headed straight into, not straight to Wellington, but just this place around the corner from there, about a day's sail, Porirua or Mana Marina. And shortly after we arrived, New Zealand went into a 4-week strict lockdown. So here we are, howling wind. And that's where my voyage came to an end. I went round to Wellington, left the boat there for 12 months, and basically flew home. And there didn't seem to be an end in sight for the restrictions, and so when I got back to Melbourne, I did my 14-day hotel quarantine at taxpayers' expense, and then was released. And yes, I thought I'd record the announcement on the aeroplane on arrival, the detention notice that we were obliged to sign, and we would be directed to a hotel, and we had to comply with all regulations. So it's quite it was really the start of all of the lockdowns and restrictions, and the rules were kind of being made up along the way. But after a bit over 12 months at home, the Trans-Tasman bubble, so-called, opened up, and I thought, now's the time to return. So I thought I'd call it unfinished business. So I was back in Wellington again about 13 months after I'd left. The boat still in the marina, and my idea now was to sail up the east coast of the North Island through Tauranga up to Bay of Islands. The family could come across again and muck about in the Bay of Islands, and then I'd sail back with some volunteer crew who would come with me back to Australia, ideally to Coffs Harbour, then Sydney, and then down to Melbourne. But of course those plans had to be revised, and so that'll be in the next part of the talk. But here I am, just reacquainting myself with Chimere and getting her prepared. So I'd allowed about 10 days to prepare for heading north, and I'd had a friend who was looking after the boat in Wellington, dropping in on a regular basis to keep everything running. which was good. And the weather in Wellington is sometimes like Melbourne, perhaps a little stronger. The winds can be just horrific. And here we had a spot of rain. But then, this you could you see the little bird drying its feathers down there on the right-hand side. So from here, I was going to sail up to the Bay of Islands and then back to Australia.